Good afternoon, everybody. This week we've been talking about the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and how they impacted the founding of the country and even lived through to today. If you think about the American experiment, how amazing is it that we still apply the principles of 10 amendments that were concluded or included in the Constitution in December of 1791. It's pretty interesting in the American experiment. For me, I chose to look at the 10th Amendment because I think the 10th Amendment summarizes nicely the framers' intent for this experiment that we call a federal republic. It's only 28 words, but it's very powerful. It says, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." At its core, it is government by the consent of the governed. It was an intensely debated amendment because on one side of the Constitutional Convention, and then following ratification, the debates over the amendments, you had the founders and framers such as Madison advocating that such a limitation was absolutely necessary because the Constitution included clauses that he felt would imply rights or powers, and he wanted to see those closely restricted. He was supported in this by factions from the smaller states such as Massachusetts or the more independently minded southern delegations. He was opposed by Hamilton, Franklin, Washington, for example, who advocated varying degrees of a very strong central executive. Hamilton argued there was no need to include this statement because by including this statement, you acknowledge the existence of implied rights and powers that did not exist, and further stated that he believed that should the amendment not be passed, that the courts would simply hold that any action taken was unconstitutional if it was outside of constitutional guidelines. One of the other suggestions was that the President of the United States should have the power to select and designate the governors of the states. We can imagine what that would have looked like today, as messy as the process has become. I found it very interesting that in the heat of the debate, Madison said that he found it interesting that several, meaning states, are particularly anxious that it should be declared in the Constitution that the powers not therein delegated should be reserved to the several states. It seems clear to me that he understood that the nature of government would be to naturally intrude and to expand if it were not limited. He saw this as a threat and sought to check that. On the other hand, Hamilton's argument again was that the government would simply have to be trusted, that it would never step out of its enumerated powers. I think that the 10th Amendment and the fact that it was used even as part of the justification for secessionism in the 1850s and 60s indicates that that debate was still very real. The role of the state versus the role of the federal government in a lot of decisions, whether it was taxation, confiscation, even slavery, for example. And more importantly, even today, when we talk about social policy, when we talk about tax policy, in fact, the most recent case that I found in my research in 2014, the Supreme Court held that even today, a private citizen of the United States has legal standing to challenge the federal government on the limits of its powers of law enforcement or in taking a person to court. And so even today, the 10th Amendment has real relevance. And I think that those 28 words sum up the entire intent and framework of our Republican experiment, which is a limitation on the central government, even limitations on the state government, and that true power resides with the people and the population. I hope you would agree with that, and I look forward to everyone's comments, and hope everyone has had a fantastic 4th of July holiday, and I look forward to hearing from everyone. Thank you.